It's understood that a boss battle is going to obviously up the ante when it comes to difficulty. Of course, not all boss battles are made even, and the following bosses had even the most seasoned veterans balking at the disparity between how tricky the game had been so far and the steady growth level of the challenge versus these boss battles that had you being like, am I supposed to be able to take down this guy? I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 8 boss battle difficulty spikes that destroyed players. Number 8, Armor, Ninja Gaiden Black. Now, not every game on this list is actually super hard. In fact, to represent a massive disparity between games so far and incredibly tough boss battle, a lot of the games on this list are not that difficult. This, however, not one of those games. Since I've just explained mathematically why there are no Souls games on this list, and we've decided those guys had their time in the WhatCulture sun, and it's time to pass the mic for a bit. And who better to grab it than the first greater fiend you can sink your blade into in Ninja Gaiden Black, Armor. Sitting well above and beyond your boss encounters so far, the first time you face Armor is particularly lethal due to her mobility, grabs, and ability to pelt down your health bar from across the room. You have to get your hits in however and whenever you can, so you'll be praying to RNGesus and all of the gods of video game protagonists for a little relief. Instant death is a legitimate concern, as is getting your health bar absolutely zapped all the way down to 0. And if you do happen to beat her and decide not to put the game down entirely, then Awakened Armor is waiting for you later in the game. She telekinetically chucks things at you when she's not blasting away with energy projectiles, has a brutal dive attack to unleash when you're at mid-range, and has a bunch of kicks and punches for good measure if you opt to get in close. The gap between Armor and what you've been used to with the likes of Bone Dragon makes Armor seem like she's ripped out of a totally different game. Standing as the definition of a skill check, Armor has a ton of grapples, can pick you up and crush you back down, and your only real hope is to knock her on the floor and just start wailing on her. Hey, at least you got a pretty stained glass window to look out of while you die. Again. Number 7, Ulanesca, Final Fantasy X. Now, it should stand as a pretty bad sign, even if you've been handling a game's challenge level pretty well so far, when an enemy has an ability called Mega Death. Now, to no one's great surprise, but a lot of players' great despair, it pretty much does what it says on the tin. This entry isn't to say there are no tricky fights before Ulanesca, as Seymour Flux and Sanctuary Keeper certainly weren't walkovers. But while the relatively smaller increase in difficulty as compared to the rest of the entries here has kept it lower on the list, the relatively higher bullshit of Ulanesca as a boss has ensured she secured a spot. As for that Mega Death complication, you'll either want to make sure you've rocked up with death-proof gear, or ensure one party member is already under a zombie status effect, because everybody knows you can't die twice. That would be silly. Like many bosses on this list, if you go into the fight knowing what you're in for, you'll be able to strategize and take her out, but if you don't know, that's the reason she's on here. Spanning 3 different forms, the second of which casts Hellbiter repeatedly, which turns all party members who are susceptible into zombies, and then casts Cura on them, which naturally harms the undead. Muddle past that circle of hell and you'll need to deal with Megadeth, more powerful versions of her spells, plus a brand new one called Mind Blast. This has the potential to inflict your party with Curse or Confuse. She also gets stronger counterattacks, which now trigger on every one of your attacks. Dying, which you will, also means you have to sit yourself down through a bulky, unskippable cutscene again, so that frustration should really well and truly have settled in. Number 6, The Doll Maker, Alice Madness Returns. Now, a game doesn't have to be an all-out ball breaker in order to have an insane difficulty spike when it comes to a boss battle, and Alice Madness Returns is a great example. Are there plenty of different ways that I could have phrased what I just said? Absolutely. Am I gonna change it? Nope. Much like me with that sentence, we can and will only march onwards, which coincidentally is one of the problems with the trickiest fight in Madness Returns, your final showdown with the Doll Maker. as everything comes to an absolutely horrifying head in one of the yuckiest ever video game encounters, in theme if not in grotesque character design. Alice Madness Returns kicks you into the deep end and tells you to figure it out with a wild combination of every nasty enemy you've encountered in the game so far, collected in a tiny arena with almost nowhere to hide. Plus, there's more fun wrinkles attached to 2 disembodied hands, which would happily join Master Hand on a list of our least favorite floating hands. As for the only moving forward bit, when you die, which you will because you'll likely need to in order to work out the many boss stages, the game doesn't throw you back in with your maximum health. Why would you be able to beat the last boss with a smaller amount of health if you couldn't do it with all your health, I hear you ask? Well, you would have heard me shouting that exact same thing, except peppered with expletives when I played this on stream. It doesn't help that you really need to finesse the game's already awkward targeting system in this fight, as more often than not, it's counterproductive. Despite being generally not all that punishing and featuring a fairly smooth ramp up and challenge from start to finish, the final fight will test not only your patience for its controls, which are clearly rooting against you, but also the dozen different enemies and their attacks that you'll need to consider all at once. Number 5, the High Priest, Beyond Good and Evil. Another boss fight that comes at the very end of a game is Jade's face-off with the Dom's High Priest in 2003's Beyond Good and Evil. This is well and truly the trickiest fight in the game that comes after what is otherwise an entirely manageable feat from start to end, though I'm not including that darn air hockey game. There can be something exciting about a boss battle that throws you a curveball by including a mechanic you've either rarely or never encountered in the game so far. Take Nathan Drake's endgame sword fight against Rafe in Uncharted 4, for example, which you probably either loved or hated. While that one wasn't an enormous pain in the ass compared to the game so far, the curveballs that Ubi had to throw at you from the big bad Doms had us wishing we skipped leg day. Now that was a clever pun based on Doms because it's the name of the alien race, and DOMS, like DOMS, which is delayed onset muscle soreness from after you work out. Anyway, sorry, let's keep going. The enormously frustrating fight takes place on a tiny little platform where, in its second phase, you need to execute consecutive hits against the bony bastard while he teleports around you without taking any damage. Mess up and you'll have to start the sequence again. How do you know how to do this, or that you either need to dodge back or find another solution when it's above you? Just fail fast and pop health fueling K-bups like there's no tomorrow. Assuming you bought loads, which you probably didn't because you didn't realize this was all going down. Right when you think you have a handle on him, the final boss stage requires you to do that whole sequence bit again, but now your controls are reversed. Now, this is a lot easier if you turn your controller upside down, but you know this is a bitchy boss fight when that's the best solution. Number 4, Robo Press, Destroy All Humans, 2020. This is another boss fight that comes at the very end of the game, and in a way, there's a small mercy when it comes at the end, because at least you got to play the whole game so far, and now you're facing off against the trickiest thing, which generally makes sense. But when it's a spike this big, sometimes that means you decide you can't do it or won't do it and put the controller down, meaning you never really get to finish that game. This is a good example of that. If you're gonna go with the title Robo Press, you ought to be able to hold your own, and while the first version of this boss battle from the original 2005 game was equally tricky, I just picked the one where you might get your little alien bum handed to you in high definition. A towering metal mech with a health bar as big as he is, you'll need to carefully navigate your UFO to lay down fire while not getting torpedoed by rockets, missiles, or his especially high damage dealing chest lasers. There are also no checkpoints in this lengthy battle and rare chances to bump up your shields, so if you didn't do your upgrading due diligence ahead of time, well, you're really gonna wish you had. Not to mention, once you off the big guy, you have to deal with the final boss, Silhouette, who zips around the battlefield and pelts you with all manner of supercharged laser attacks and shield draining maneuvers that can easily prove lethal. Now, the difficulty of these boss fights does not track with the difficulty of the game so far, but if you were looking for a final boss face-off that really makes you feel like you're earning that invasion of Earth, this is certainly it. Number 3, Kanekazu Okamura, Persona 5 Royal. Now this is a jest list, and if you've seen enough of my list, then you may be playing a fun at-home game, which is how long until Jess mentions Persona 5 Royal. Well, you can stop your timers because I've done it now. In my defense, Okamura is a painful little twerp who absolutely deserves to be on this list. Yes, it's obviously awful that Okamura, father of Phantom Thief Sweetie Pie Haru, is a conniving manipulator who works his employees to death. But it gets hard to care about the employees when Okamura throws them at you in waves. Not only that, you need to down every one of the 8 waves of 4 foes in 2 rounds, or one of them will blow up on you. Your whole party takes damage, and Okamura just brings out another group of the same wave, so you need to fight that exact wave all over again. Even learning your foe's weaknesses won't make up for his multiple turns, your inability to use your vital all-out attack due to his presence, or the last employee sent to finish you off, Execu Robo. If you weren't having a tough enough time with this wild boss difficulty spike, then this guy in particular has complete resistances to everything, constantly gets buffs, and has attacks that can wipe your party. Another fairly important thing I've neglected to mention is that for the entire fight, you're on a 30-minute timer, a timer that also includes some mid-fight chit-chat, which I suggest you look up once you're finished. As if this fight needed one more wildly unfair addition, when you think it's all over, Okamura throws Robot Haru in there to self-destruct on you. Even when guarding, she does a pile of damage, and if RNG smites protagonist Joker, it's back to the start of the fight for you. Players struggling are actually encouraged to bump the difficulty up to Merciless for increased damage to weaknesses if they want to have an easier go of this fight, which is just wild. This is also one of the few encounters that got nastier and worse in the Royal version, so you got that to look forward to if you wanted to play it all over again. Number 2, Old Acquaintances, Yakuza Like a Dragon. Now I've been coy with this one because I hate to include spoilers unless I absolutely have to, but these guys needed to be on the list. Now I feel like I've waffled for long enough that if you really wanted to not find out who it is, then you won't. Okay, I'm gonna start and tell you who it is in a second, but basically this is the part of the game that made me go, ooh, and probably you too. Unfortunately, in the case of the Chapter 12 boss fight, which pits you against recurring characters and fan favorite Goro Majima and Taiga Saejima, the cool factor wore off quickly when you realized just how brutally stomped you were getting. The punishing nature of the fight makes absolute sense in the game's lore, as protagonist Ichiban and crew are up against 2 of the baddest dudes ever to set foot in Kamurocho. But this is a fight that launched 1,000 forum threads and Reddit posts that asked, how the hell am I supposed to beat these dudes? Now the game reckons you can take on this fight at level 41, but most players who tried to do that at that level or thereabouts will tell you that's a damn lie. Between Majima clones, Saejima tackling like a truck, and a combo move that'll easily chomp hundreds of HP off its victim, all while many of your attacks land like a pool noodle, this is a battle that actually caused a bunch of players to completely tap out of the game. There is a battle arena that you've just been introduced to, which you can use to grind up levels and gear, but the face-off represents a wild difficulty spike in comparison to not just the regular baddies, but every other boss so far. If for some reason you didn't have the worst time up against these two, then Chapter 14 will have you try to best series mainstay Kiryu, who has the resistances of a god. So that's about as easy as it sounds. Number 1, Boost Guardian, Metroid Prime 2. There comes a point in every Metroid game when the steady ramp up of difficulty yeets off that radar and introduces a boss battle that will have you thinking there's no way they intended for you to be able to beat them. For Metroid Prime 2, many players were left mouth agape, controller in hand, when they came up against the boss Boost Guardian. While Spider Guardian is right up there in the terrible twosome of Prime 2 bosses you never ever want to face again, we've included Boost from, let's be clear, the GameCube version, as the difficulty was turned down for the 2009 trilogy release for the Wii. For those of you unlucky enough to face this giant spiky bastard back in the 2004 edition, you were victims of what I can only assume is developer Retro Studios deciding children needed to learn the meaning of pain. Actually, on that, Brian Walker, who headed up the development studio, told IGN at one point that he himself couldn't actually beat Boost Guardian without dropping into debug mode. So with that knowledge, I mean, how could we put anything else at number 1? Boost Guardian, why do we hate thee? Let me count the ways. Nowhere in the arena to escape its truly punishing attacks, an unreasonably high damage output, few opportunities to recover your health, no Dark Ether free safe zones meaning you're constantly poisoned, and a super fun mode where you can't damage Boosty in his ball form unless you're using multiple bombs, but he can still obliterate you. Awesome.